Real pleasure to have Sabrina Horn back again. Sabrina, welcome back. This time we're going to talk about her new book, Make It, Don't Fake It. What a great title. She's going to launch it next week, next Tuesday. Congratulations, Sabrina. Great quotes and monikers in the book. Things like fakeometer, work-life balance. Here's where I gave up on it. Wow. And leader and loser both start with L. So, but overall, it's about values in the tech industry that you and I have both been in. And, unfortunately in the industry, well, fortunately, we worry about unicorn valuations and we worry about Wall Street. Values kind of, sometimes go by the wayside. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, Sabrina. Everyone knows you, but why don't you spend a minute talking about yourself first?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back, Vinnie. I'll give you a quick summary. I'm the only child of two German immigrants, and I would say their entrepreneurial spirit and their survival instincts probably infused me to want to start my own business, which I did at the age of 29. It was in the early 90s. And
last year?
Yeah, right. I was very interested in communications and PR. In high school and college, I got a graduate degree in PR. And I saw this new wave of business application software companies building new applications for the PC revolution, which was the thing back then. And I thought, well, that's a market where maybe I could focus on. And I also thought that there was a different way of doing PR that I could bring to the table at that time. You probably recall too that most of the PR in Silicon Valley was very tactical and kind of a function of marketing that didn't get much airtime in the C-suite. And there were maybe a handful of firms that were considered strategic. So I wanted to participate in that higher level of thinking, and was very fortunate to win my first client, a wonderful little company back then called PeopleSoft, and built a business. I worked with probably 1,000 executives in all of their companies to launch their businesses, countless rounds of financing and product launches and crises and a few IPOs in between. We had several offices across the US and partners overseas, and I sold it 24 years later in 2015 to Fin Partners, which is a global marketing firm, and then took some time off, wrote this book, and now I'm talking to you.
Sabrina, 1995, I was a young Gartner analyst, and I think one of my first notes was on PeopleSoft. Mm-hmm. Gartner used to have the courtesy of a vendor review. Mm-hmm. And I was warned that most vendors try to take advantage of it, especially some other companies that you and I know in Silicon Valley. And they said, so Vinnie, when they call, just don't be too defensive. Just take whatever they tell you. Don't agree to anything. Uh-huh. And this young lady called Sabrina Horn from Horn Group calls. I go, there's nobody from PeopleSoft. This is going to be interesting. Sabrina, that was a delightful experience. You weren't threatening. You were, just very polite, very professional about it. And I don't think you made too many changes. So right there, you were off to a great start, and you helped me, feel comfortable. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad that was a good experience for you, Vinnie.
So tell me, I've written 7 books. I'm writing an 8th one now. Mm-hmm. And I've never written anything like you have about values and so on. And that covers that long a historical perspective. So tell me how the book came about. I mean, did you keep a diary through your career, or did you just take advantage of the pandemic and say, hey, let me just think back?
Yeah, no, I never kept a diary. It's all up in here. Wow. No, I was always told that I should write a book about my crazy career and some of the crazier things that happened in it. but I wanted there to be a message, right, and behind it, a benefit to the readers. And I, at the same time, in the last, I would say 5 years, I have felt like we've disintegrated into this world where integrity is somewhat optional, and that integrity just doesn't matter as much anymore in business and in society. The whole fake it till you make it mantra has, I think, fueled that and accelerated that, and has crossed the line from being something that was just a little tongue-in-cheek quip to business advice that you can only fake it, you can only make it if you fake it. And so that's all about exaggerating the truth and selective truth telling and lying on your resume, for example. And none of that is good, because what happens is at the end of the day, or at some point in the future, the truth always comes out. And when it does, you'll be exposed. You'll set yourself back and sabotage your success, sometimes quite severely. So my goal with this book was to help entrepreneurs and executives do a level set and lead their businesses with integrity.
So Sabrina, maybe I misread, but I saw a little bit of a hedge. You talk about be authentic in your leadership and have integrity, but then you also say it's got to be reality based.
Yep.
So explain why you hedge a little bit on the authenticity and the integrity and so on.
Yeah, I mean, no, simply because in order to lead with authenticity and integrity, you have to be grounded in reality. You have to be grounded in the truth. And like, what do we know about reality and the truth? They can be very hard to face, particularly if there's a crisis of your own doing where you made a mistake or there's a product flaw, that you have to admit to, or you have to face doing layoffs, for example, if there's a market downturn. It's easy to fake it and stick your head in the sand or blame the problem on someone else. So you have to know what is unknown, and you have to lead through fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and operating from a basis of reality means you can lead authentically. So that's what I mean by reality-based leadership.
So, you describe a lot of entrepreneurs, and obviously you worked with a lot of large companies too. Is it easier as an entrepreneur because you don't have the pressure of public reporting and so on to be, to accept your guidance? Because it would seem like as a public company leader, just the pressures of quarterly reporting and so on, it would make some of your guidance really, really tough. So tell me, you covered both entrepreneurs and bigger companies. Mm-hmm. Where are you finding it easier, and where are you finding people take a little more leeway with your guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I think people fake it in small companies and big companies all the time. And
are you talking about a couple of, like the lady in the pharmaceutical space?
Yes, Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. I mean, size is not a requirement for fakery, right? I mean, I think certainly if you're a publicly traded company, there are rules and regulations that you have to follow, but there's plenty of shenanigans that can occur there too, as we've seen. I think with smaller companies, the risk is greater because a small company, a startup, may be run by an entrepreneur who's starting a business for the first time and may be easily overwhelmed by the pressures of solving problems all the time, right? As the leader of a growing business, facing challenges that he or she may have never faced before. So from that standpoint, I think the book may appeal more to entrepreneurs and executives of emerging growth companies.
So, we talk about ethics, you got to bring up Gandhi, right? He's a widely respected figure on a number of fronts. Some people like him because obviously he's nonviolent approach to nonviolence, right? Basically drove the British crazy and drove them out of India by his not, turning the other cheek kind of model. I don't think this is quoted enough, but I like a single quote of him where he says, the customer is God. Customer is a guest in our house. He really is empathetic to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in technology, I think we view customers as just a cow to be milked, right? So tell me, like, how do you justify margins in the 80s and 90s? I mean, there is no empathy for the customer. That's like, we're entitled to it, right? That's the attitude in a number of technology companies. Mm-hmm. What would you say? Did you look at the customer angle when you were writing the book?
Yes, of course. I mean, that those 80 to 90% margins, I mean, that's just bad behavior, and that will catch up with them, and probably has. Yes, I looked at the customer angle. I told a story in my book about how after the recession, when money was tight, we had been through basically 2 years of being a nonstop crisis, and it was bring in the revenue at all costs. And we pitched a fintech company on the East Coast. It was a huge deal, $500,000 deal. And for us, that was enormous. And we totally oversold that customer. We overpromised. We sold them on capabilities we never had. And we lost every piece of that deal until we lost it all, and a piece of our reputation. And we were faking it. I led that pitch because we really needed the revenue. And so that was a very hard lesson to learn, but an extremely important one. You have to respect your customer. You can't operate a business like that. It will catch up with you and it'll ruin your reputation. I will say now, after the pandemic, I also believe there's a renewed respect for the customer, about value given for value received, and for the potential exposure when that's not received. I will also say there's the matter of brand authenticity, right? If you want to build a brand that's about fleecing your customers, well, then we'll see how long that lasts. But if you want to build an authentic brand where the experience is consistent and where customers love what you're delivering, right? That's how you have a sustainable business over time.
In the new book I'm writing, there's quite a bit of focus on outcome-based pricing. Mm-hmm. And I have some great quotes from a couple of customers on, how if your interests are aligned with the customers, it's a wonderful relationship, right? And outcome-based, usually, if you can get it right, customer sees the results and you get compensated for that. So kind of a little bit of a diversion, but you have a chapter about leading in a crisis. Yes. My God, 2020 challenged us. As Mark Benioff said, he says, is this a pandemic or an epidemic? Started off as a health crisis, became a financial crisis, then became a diversity crisis. Then obviously towards the end of the year, we had a political crisis, right? Mm-hmm. And we had a sustainability crisis with fires and God knows what else, right? Yeah. I mean, no MBA school prepares us for even one crisis. Last year was just unbelievable, right? So tell us what your book talks about leadership in a crisis.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think that is the new, I hate that phrase, the new normal, but I believe every leader has to be armed with crisis plans now, because it's just going to be the way it is for the foreseeable future. And crises come in a number of different forms, right? They are external and internal. External can be market-driven or economic. It can be natural, like an earthquake or a hurricane or fires, which we saw. It can be man-made, like the pandemic and cyber attacks, and internal within your own organization. You've got to plan for the unimaginable. And so my advice in all the executives that I'm coaching now, you have to have multiple contingency plans in your back pocket. You have to hope for the best and plan for the worst. So you always know where you stand in the middle, and you have enough arrows in your quiver to pull the trigger on something, right? Because the last thing you want to do is develop a crisis plan when you're in crisis, right? It just doesn't work. So, contingency plans, disaster recovery, and then plans for business continuity. And you want to have multiple options for the short term and then the longer term, right? Because we know that things can change day by day or even week by week. And your board and your advisors have to be involved in that. I would also say to all the leaders facing this, you have to take care of yourself because it is tremendously exhausting and emotionally taxing, and it can wear you down. And so you have to build your resilience by making sure you have a safety net of mentors who are the people who will give it to you straight when they need to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, right? And find ways of continuing to connect with others who are probably in the same boat as you.
I did about 100 C-level executives last year. I started a video series because what I found was executives amazingly had time, or at least where they didn't have to travel. They suddenly had half an hour here, half an hour there, and they were very generous, right? Yeah. After each one of them, or during each one of them, I was tempted to ask exactly what you're saying, which is, God, you must be so lonely right now. Who do you turn to, right? Unfortunately, I don't think anyone would have answered me publicly, right? On the quiet, they would have talked to me about it, but I couldn't on the record get them to talk about it, right? What do you, did you talk to leaders about loneliness? You talk about mentors and all that.
Yeah.
You talk to them about loneliness and opening up to somebody.
Yeah. Look, I experienced it myself in 24 years of running my own company. If you're a CEO, by definition, there's only one of you, and there's no one down the hall for you to talk to, really. And so I recommend that you join peer groups across different industries or within your industry. Either form them yourself, or there are certainly third-party organizations like Vistage and YPO that bring executives together. Some of the most comfort I ever got was from a peer group of CEOs I joined. And it was a CEO of an oil company, a toy maker, and a furniture company. Mm-hmm. And your businesses are different, but the problems you experience at the core are the same. I would also say, it's lonely because your employees don't want to go out with the boss after work for drinks. And you have to make very difficult decisions that can be very unpopular. So you feel isolated from your own, from your people. And that can cause anxiety, it can cause even depression, and it can affect your business judgment. So to foster more connection beyond peer groups, I always say, expressions of gratitude are such a great way of getting fulfillment out of other people and what they have done to contribute to your organization. Teaching a class, mentoring other people, right, is a form of connection that feeds the soul. So it's very important.
That's some great pieces of advice right there. Mm-hmm. I particularly liked your fakeometer in the book. Uh-huh. My God, you managed to find 50 Shades of Lies. Yeah. 50 Shades of Gray. Your book should have been 50 Shades of Lies.
That was actually a title under consideration. Yeah.
But some of the lies you defend, most of them you discredit, yeah. Right? Spend a little time. Describe the nuances. Some of the ones that you defend, some of them you go, no way.
Yeah, so when I was writing the book, I was trying to capture in different buckets all of the different types of ways that people fake it. And it's not always lying either, which I'll explain in a second. And so I created this continuum of what would be considered innocent to outright criminal activity. So on one end of the spectrum is acting as if, which is actually a technique used in modern cognitive behavioral therapy, where people who feel insecure or they don't feel confident emulate the behaviors that they want to exude until they start to practice them enough to become them. Visualizing yourself in a meeting to take the anxiety out of it, dressing for success. These are all forms of self-help, which are perfectly fine and innocent. But you start to cross the line.
In the past, we used to call them white lies, I guess.
Yeah, white lies. Like, you know, if somebody says like, how, you know, is you're out on a date and somebody says, how was dinner? And, you know, and it was awful, but you still say, oh, honey, it was really good. You know, like, that's okay. You know, you're not hurting anybody. And we just need to sometimes get through the night, you know, but,
Sabrina, I need to go to charm school. I'm too much of an analyst.
Well, you know, there's a place for honesty and, you know, when you're with your date, but we're talking about business situations here. So I think you cross the line into faking it when you do or say something at someone else's expense for your own personal gain. So the most common way that people fake it is they exaggerate the truth. An entrepreneur exaggerates what his product can do to the VCs in the investor deck. A salesperson overpromises what the product can do to the customer to win the deal. You lie on your resume or in a job interview, right? And then from there it goes to minimizing the truth, where you selectively, you tell the truth, but you leave out certain details. So you're not getting the full transparent picture. And that can be very dangerous, as was in the case with the Boeing Max aircraft disasters. Then there's another form of fakery, as I said, that's not lying, but it's what I call ostrich lies, because you're so overwhelmed by a situation, you truly don't know what to do. So you just stick your head in the sand and shove the problem under the rug. Now, the problem with that is you're not operating from a basis of reality. You're delaying action and probably hurting your company even more. And then from there, we go to just, you know, total outright fraud and deception, you know, a la Bernie Madoff or Elizabeth Holmes. But most of us, of course, don't go to that end of the extreme.
So this is going to be a sensitive topic. But since we're talking about fakery and so on, but there's a lot of activism, right, in the executive suite now. And, you know, everything, gender topics, race topics, it seems like CEOs have to celebrate whether they like it or not every holiday and, you know, make statements which, honestly, I don't think many of them, if they weren't forced into in the environment, would be making, right? Mm-hmm. So my personal philosophy has always been be active, but in your personal life, right? Don't tie it to your corporate title, your corporate role, and so on. But it seems like if you don't do it today, you're considered, it's one of these, if you're not with me, you're against me kind of, I mean, society has just become so demanding of supporting every cause, no matter how fringe, right? Mm-hmm. How do we, and again, this goes back to my analyst thing. To me, the role of a company is to, you know, executives is get the highest productivity, deliver the best products, et cetera, right? What does a customer want from you? They don't want to be glam-handed about your attitude about racism and so on. Tell me if you looked at the whole activism issue in your book.
Yeah, well, it's a great discussion topic, and I have to say, first of all, that there is such a thirst and a hunger for people to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and whatever cause they're interested in. There's such a thirst for it because it hasn't happened in forever. And so since we spend most of our time at work, that's where we want to relate to it and talk about it. And especially now, there is such a need for the employee experience. Employees want to feel like they belong to a company who has values that they identify with. And if they don't, then, they start to think about, well, what does this company stand for? Should I go somewhere else? And that puts leaders in a difficult position. You have to balance the employee experience with what I call the profitability experience. And the other point is, you can't put lipstick on a pig. You can't just suddenly say, we're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, we've got these, it has to be authentic. And so if you're going to do that and you haven't yet, right, and it just hasn't been part of your culture, then you have to gently and authentically start to weave that in. And that's acceptable. It's okay to say, we haven't had enough of a focus on that. It's important. And we're going to be doing A, B, and C now. And we'd like for you to help us participate and help us be the best that we can at that. And my next suggestion to those leaders is to channel that energy, to have a forum for discussion for all the employees who feel strongly about a certain issue or a topic, and create the space for it to occur. On company time or after hours, have a professional coach come in and lead the discussion, make sure the leaders are present in that, and then take action items from that. But you cannot have it be permeating and percolating throughout the whole organization, because it breeds negativity. It breeds a culture of misery loves company. And we still have to run a business. So there's such a fine balance there.
That's my point is, I think it's great to have the diversity conversations, right?
Yeah.
As a brown man, I certainly don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I just worry that there's not enough focus on, hey, productivity, customer, excellent products. It just seems like that voice has been tamped down a little bit.
Yeah.
And we need both.
Yeah, we need both. I can share a very quick example of how not to do it. We know a company called Basecamp, right? They make work collaboration software. And a couple of months ago, I don't know all the exact details, but a lot of employees were discussing the DEI situation, social injustice. And I believe the CEO didn't want the employees talking about those issues in the company lunchroom or wherever they were. And he said, we don't want you to do that. And you can take this 6-month severance package and leave if you don't want to comply with our policy. So something like, I think 30% of the company walked out. And then the CEO had to retrench and apologize and sort of regroup, right? And now they have all these DEI programs. So that's not how you want to do it. So it is a fact of reality that this is what the workforce of today is concerned about. And employers have to find a way to address it in a way that still fits within the confines of generating revenue.
Well, we probably should have another discussion on that in a few months, because clearly, the balancing act, I don't think we've figured out.
No, we have not.
Agreed. Sabrina, the core values you bring out, clearly I know you're Facebook friends, and I know how much you talk about your parents, both who have passed, but tell me about some of the mentors and, who else influenced you that, the core values come through so loudly in the book. Tell us about some of your mentors.
Yeah. Yes. Clearly.
And particularly your mother.
Yes. Oh, my mom, who, when she was 17, survived the fire bombings of the Allied forces in Dresden in 1945 and coaxed a firebomb that landed on the roof of their house to the side, where it extinguished, I guess, in the septic area. So from that, I learned, like, okay, you've got to meet every crisis head on. You've got to look at reality in the face and deal with it. But there are other mentors, as you asked. So many of the leadership teams that I worked with in the tech companies, I mean, PeopleSoft, of course, being just had such an excellent leadership team, such a testament to their success. I learned a lot from Dave Duffield about building a culture and company values and how they can protect your business and serve your customers. And I learned so much from Jeffrey Moore from the Chasm Group as well about the importance of the customer relationship and the notion of integrity as well. But I have to say, like, I learned a ton from my own employees. I learned about patience and empathy, and I became a better CEO because I was a mom. So there's little lessons everywhere you look, if you just look hard enough to find them, But I also chose different mentors for different periods of time in my life and for different stages of the company's growth. So that is important to state as well.
Well, certainly Dave Duffield, you learned from the best, but it's a compliment to you that you would honor your employees and your kids for inspiring you also. So Sabrina, I've written 7 books. I'm working on the 8th one. Every time I finish one, I go, what the hell did I do that for, right? I love the whole research project. I love interviewing people. I hate the editing process. And I can't wait. The last few weeks, it's drive you nuts, right? Yeah. Tell me about the really joyful moments in your book journey.
Yeah.
And let's not even ruin it. Just talk about the joyful moments.
Yeah. I mean, I having never written a book before, I really didn't know what to expect. I loved it. I found it to be unexpectedly therapeutic. I wrote the book during COVID. So, this is a good time to write a book. There wasn't much else to do. So I really had full on like concentration and the headspace and the time to do it and do it well. And I even learned about some things I didn't realize while writing the book about my own journey, where one situation enlightened me to another situation. It came to me as I was writing that one chapter. And to now see the finished product and to know that maybe, if it gives the person who's reading it an idea that they hadn't thought of before, or makes them think twice, then it will have done its job.
Sabrina, a lot of people last year called 2020 the worst year ever, right? I have a very optimistic wife, so we actually had a pretty good 2020, and between all the video interviews I did and so on, 2020 to me was like you say, a kind of a pivot point, but it wasn't that bad. But it takes a certain kind of mindset, right? How are you able to focus on the book when the media was driving everyone nuts and the politicians were driving everyone nuts? You must be a very disciplined person to be able to do that.
Well, running a PR firm for 24 years will do that to a person. You have to be really disciplined and be able to run a ton of things in parallel and multitask. I don't know. I just, I made it a priority. And when I say I'm going to do something, I get it done.
Well, you're being modest. I'm sure it took a lot of effort to do that.
I mean, there weren't too many distractions. The kids woke up at about noon, 1 o'clock. That was when I got most of my writing done by.
You could have been like 90% of other people screaming on social media and listening to the press that was just so eager to get us anxious, so anxious to get us anxious.
Yeah. I mean, I could feel myself getting sucked into it as well. And I like to watch the news because I like to be informed, and but but it's also, you get sucked into it and then it's not really productive anymore. And there was so much misery going on that, you know, it was more important to create a little bit of levity and some positive thinking in the house here.
Any final thoughts, Sabrina?
Yeah, I mean, all I would just say is, like, to all the people who are listening to this, to your great podcast, you know, there's no need to fake it, because everyone has what it takes to make it on their own anyway. You just have to do the hard work and stay focused on reality. And the last thing is that I would say, if the journey is truly the reward, then you want to make sure it's a good one.
Well, it's out Tuesday,
Yes.
and it should be available on Amazon ebook and print.
Yes.
In all fine bookstores. So, you know, you mentioned to me that your first run has already sold out. Congratulations. It's already a success. And, you know, on Tuesday, hopefully you'll get many more. So, Sabrina,
Yes.
congratulations again. Welcome to the Author Club. And
Thank you.
Much success with the book and everything else.
Thank you very much, Vinnie. Thanks for your support and for having me on again, and look forward to staying in touch.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.